Hello everyone. My name is Meenakshi Singh, and I am CEO and founder of Sustaina Greens. We are based in Vadodara, Gujarat, and I welcome you all on behalf of Sustaina Greens and Nature Conservation and Study Center, Nepal, for this exciting symposium on pollinator conservation. So, I would like to thank each and everyone for taking out your precious time to gain insights on different types of pollinators. So we have with us our esteemed speakers from India as well as Nepal. So who will be enlightening us on pollinators like birds, bats, bees, and butterflies, and why their conservation is one of our utmost priority. So I would like to welcome Dr. Pankaj Kopade sir from MIT World Peace University, Mr. Sanjan Thapaji from Small Mammals Conservation and Research Foundation, and Mr. Sanej Suvalji from Nature Conservation and Study Center. Unfortunately, Ms. Omima Khaludi from UAE is not with us today because of some personal reasons. But myself and our co-host, Mr. Jeevan Raiji from Nature Conservation and Study Center, and our team members, Ms. Garima Singh, Ms. Pratiksha Chalke, and Bhavya Mishra will be here taking you all to this exciting session, and will make sure that all of you will gain the knowledge related to pollinators, and we seek your active participation in the quiz competition. And we would like to tell you that we will be providing you e-certificates for attending this session. However, the mandatory presence of 90% attendance is required to get this e-certificate, which will be co-certified by our collaborators like IUCN and Nature for All, as well as MIT WPU. So I look forward to you, and I am like happy to announce that in this session we will be telling you the declaring the participants, the top 10 participants who perform very well in the quiz competition, and we will be sharing some guides in between in the question and answer session. So I request everyone to actively participate and write down their questions in the chat box or the question and answer panel. You can mention, or in case if you want having, if you are having any doubt, please raise your hand, and once our speaker session is over, we will be taking your questions. So stay tuned, and now I look forward to take this session ahead. So I guess Mr. Pankaj sir is there. Jivanji, has he joined?
Yes, she has joined.
Okay.
Pankaj sir?
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
sir, I would like to take the opportunity to invite you for this and welcome for this session. So please take ahead and share your screen. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you, Dr. Meenakshi ji. So shall I share my screen? Okay. All right. Okay, just a minute. Let me open my PPT. Okay, so I hope my screen is visible to everyone. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, so first of all, thanks a lot for inviting me to be one of the speakers for this esteemed symposium. And I guess this particular symposium is going to go much ahead because we'll be having more and more discussion on the pollinators or maybe some other aspects of the animal world. So since I work primarily on birds, I'll be talking more about birds in detail, but we'll also touch upon to some of the other aspects of pollinators. So my topic is about birds, definitely, but it's on about their roles, the threats, the various types of threats these bird pollinators are facing today, and what are the various strategies or the mitigation measures the world should adapt to safeguard that these pollinators are doing well in their own ecosystems. So my session is going to be slightly interactive. Of course, there are questions at the end of all the sessions, but I'm going to ask you questions in between. So be ready, be attentive, and you might also have some fun while we are going ahead with this particular, presentation. So first thing, before we start, to all of you, all the participants, how many of you really think that birds contribute more than 50% in the pollination, the process of pollination? If you look at the entire animal world, how many of you think that birds contribute more than 50%? Yes, no. You can just type in your responses and then we can go ahead.
In fact, the participants, they can raise their hands to confirm it.
Okay, yeah, you can raise your hands, or I can still see some responses. So, so just keep that, park that thought in your mind. We'll see how, whether that question is answered or not as we go ahead. Okay. So my talk is going to outline some of the aspects regarding the bird pollinators. First of all, we'll try to understand what is pollination, whether it's an ecosystem service or not, and how exactly it happens. Then we'll try to recover the bird's role, in the pollination process. We will also try to understand if there are any threats to the bird pollinators, and then we will try to delineate these threats through various studies that have been conducted. We will also think about various strategies which can be applied for mitigating these threats. And eventually I'll also present a little bit of a gap analysis that's available, so you can also realize that there is a wide scope if you want to study bird pollination as such. So moving forward, so pollination is one of the most crucial, very important process which happens and which makes various plants, various trees to reproduce. Okay, so pollination brings a lot of diversity. It also involves a lot of interactions. And as we know that approximately 87% of all the flowering plants, they depend upon animals as the pollinating agents. There are also different types of pollinator agents, like there is a wind pollination, is followed by some other type of pollination, but animals, they are contributing much larger sort of a service towards pollination of plants. So while pollination is happening, as we know that all our crops, they are getting pollinated, we pollination ensures that there is food security, there's availability of raw material, for example timber, nutrients are cycled in the ecosystem. There's also soil erosion control, and there are various several linked services which go along with the plant reproduction or the pollination. So pollination is a really an important topic in especially in today's scenario of climate change and the food security. Pollination becomes a very essential topic to discuss. Of course, we will be dissecting out, we'll be trying to figure out what are the nitty-gritties, who are involved, who are the stakeholders, and how we can go ahead with it. But just to give you a glimpse, other speakers will also talk about it. But just to give you a glimpse, pollination is really important step in the process of plant reproduction, and which is done 87% of the plants dependent for animals as pollinating agent. So that's again a very important role the animals are playing here. But here I'm talking about animals. I've not yet gone into birds. Okay, so just hold on. We'll move ahead. So if you try to compare the value of pollinators as such, there are different types of pollinators, not just birds. Birds are actually one of the pollinators, but major pollination is done by insects. And within them, we have bees, we have wasps, we have moths, we have beetles. We in Apart from insects, we have birds, which is again another major contributor toward pollination. But we also have bats, sometimes lizards, and some mammals too. They do pollination. But again, coming back to the figures, 87% of the plant, and that's actually a very large number. If you now try to connect the pollination as a service to the sustainable development goals provided by the United Nations, there are three important goals that the pollinations and the pollinators are touching upon. So the first goal is the zero hunger. Zero hunger actually ensures that there is food security. And by this, we are saying that crop production and the food production is actually proportionate to the population growth, and everyone is getting, their plate full basically. So zero hunger is ensured when pollinators are doing well, pollination is happening. Okay. When you have good food, you have good health. So that's why say SDG 3, good health and well-being, is also sort of satisfied by all these different pollinators if they are doing good. And finally, I'll come down to the SDG 15, which is life on land. So if pollinators are doing well, pollinators are again making a big chunk of animals, on land. So if they are doing good, then the life on land is also good. So we have to understand that pollination is not like a one-way traffic. It's not, it's not a process which just go from one point A to point B. There are so many interactions, there are so many loops, there are so many feedback loops in it, and actually it becomes more and more interesting and complex to understand. And that is why thinking that if pollinators and pollination, it's only one-way traffic, that's actually not how we are going to understand this whole complex process. Okay, so so SDG 3 SDGs at least we are touching upon to when you are directly studying pollinators. So again, pollination being a very complex process, having studies on pollinators can actually inform a lot of policies and a lot of decision makers about what exactly we have to do to make the world a better place. So moving forward, now we'll come to birds. So as I mentioned that most of the pollination is conducted done by insects. Birds are actually not a major contributor. But if you look at birds, they are not just pollinators. They're also doing services with respect to seed dispersal, which is again like a major chunk of services provided by the birds. Birds do provide a lot many other services, but I'm just going to stick to these two things, pollination and seed dispersal, because they go hand in hand. So reproduction is one thing, but post reproduction, when the seeds are dispersed to a distance, then it also ensures that there is a diversity and there is a propagation of forest which is happening. So birds do that. Again, there are 10,000 or so birds globally, that around 10,000 species of birds that you see globally. Around, just a proportion, like around 100 1089 avian species are known to act as pollinators across the globe. And there are some families of birds which are known to be, you know uh, much more, sort of studied for their pollinating services. For example, hummingbirds or sunbirds. So these are nectarivorous birds, and in the process of eating nectar, they actually pollinate. So that's how they become pollinators. So we have to understand that there's a lot of evolutionary dynamics as well with respect to flowers and birds. So you see that there are flowers which are primarily pollinated by insects, whereas some flowers are primarily pollinated by birds. And there is a difference in the overall shape, size, as well as color when you compare these different flowers. So it means that the pollination process has evolved over time, and it has got modified perhaps over the time, as and when it actually experienced different types of pressures. So there are a lot of examples in which people talk about that, how a particular bird is adapted to pollinate a particular flower, and how that flower is actually sort of has co-evolved over time. So these are called as mutualistic pollination interactions. So for example, in this picture you see that this one hummingbird is having much longer beak. Similarly, as you can see, the flower shape, it's almost like a tubule, and the bird has to go inside to get the nectar. So in that process is actually pollinating as it moves from one flower to another flower, right? So now one question arises is that, okay, so if this bird is fitting to this particular flower, all right, and it sounds really interesting, very romantic, right? However, what will happen if this bird is gone extinct, or if this bird moves away, goes somewhere else, or finds some other food source? What's going to happen to that flower? Now, without the bird, it will not be able to pollinate, it will not be able to reproduce, right? So, to avoid this, something called as a complete reproductive failure for that particular plant, there will be some minor pollinators in terms of perhaps other insects or might be other birds or maybe other animals, right? So though majorly you are seeing the mutualistic pollination happening, the plants also make sure that there are ways that it can survive. Otherwise, the plant will also go extinct. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that again, pollination is not like a one-way, direction process. It's pretty dynamic. So even if you understand one particular species of plant and one particular species of, bird or other animal pollinator and how they interact, that itself makes, a lot of gives you a lot of information about pollination as an overall process. So we'll see some more of such behavior. They're very interesting behaviors. So we know hummingbirds are like pretty, diverse in terms of their colors, their flight pattern, their beak shape, beak length, as well as the way they interact with various flowers. And there are a lot of studies conducted on hummingbirds, especially. So in fact, one of the BMC articles, titles as "Hummingbirds and Plants: An Evolutionary Love Affair," because it's almost like they are complementary to each other. Okay, so flowers, the shape of flower as well as the hummingbird's beak is pretty complementary to each other. So in these graphics, you can see how diverse they might be, and you can see the shape, length, and uh, their beak length as well as beak, curvature and all that. So it basically is an adaptation to take a particular flower nectar, and that's how they have developed. But again, as I mentioned, that maybe this looks really, really amazing and very complementary, but there might be some other dynamics also happening. But this was just to give an example that hummingbirds is pretty much well studied families when it comes to bird pollination. So there are some other birds also who are bypassing the pollination, and this is again a very interesting behavior. So these are again birds studied from South America, where we have flower piercers. So as the name suggests, these birds not necessarily do the traditional pollination. They can actually steal the nectar of a flower, and in a way they are basically changing or reducing the reproductive fitness of the flower. So what exactly they do, as you can see in the graphics over here. So if you focus on the right side panel of these graphics, so this is called as antagonistic nectar robbing. So this particular bird has a very interesting and very peculiar beak shape, as you can see in the pictures. So this bird will directly go to the base of the flower where you have more and more nectar, like it's filled with nectar. So the bird will pierce that part and it will suck nectar from there. So it is completely bypassing going inside the flower and then reaching out to the nectar, because it's not possible for the bird. As you can see, the bird's overall neck length and the beak length. So it's a pretty stout bird, right? It cannot reach through the tubule and cannot go to the nectar. So it would rather go to the base and it will steal the nectar. But by this, the flower is at disadvantage because there is no way the anthers are getting stuck on the bird's head or anywhere on the body part, so that it can get cross pollinated. So that's not happening. But researchers have also found that if this keeps on happening, then again it's a disadvantage and the species might be lost. The plant species might be lost because there is nectar robbing happening. So it not always happen this way. Okay, this is one side of the story that we are reading. While these flower piercers are doing this, it is observed very well, and also in many other birds, you can see this nectar robbing behavior. So it is also speculated and also hypothesized that when there are multiple flowers, then when the bird comes in, it actually attracts a lot of anthers, on the pollens on the anthers, and it gets on the bird's body so that it can cross pollinate. So that's again shown here, called as mutualistic nectar robbing. So as you can see in this picture, how that bird is interacting with multiple flowers and getting the pollen stuck on its body. Similarly, they actually also do pollination, mutualistic legitimate visit, in which the flowers which are of shorter length, they actually dive into it, deep into it, and then they suck the nectar. So that way they are actually pollinating. So not all the birds are always pollinating. First of all, not all the birds are always not pollinating. Some are also robbing nectar. So it's pretty interesting and dynamic system as such. And bird pollination, that's why it becomes more and more interesting as you study it more. There are also other ways to look at it. So as I mentioned that pollination is one of the services provided by birds, but again, another major service is the seed disperser service. So sometimes for a particular plant, you will have a particular species of bird which is pollinating that species, whereas there is another set of species which might be dispersing the fruits or the seeds, of that species. So they're eating the fruits and then they're dispersing the seed. So either only one species is doing it, or it could be multiple species doing it. So there are a lot of interactions also happening with the plant and the bird communities, as well as at a seasonal level. So there is also a time delay, and it's pretty again interesting and dynamic system if you look at it. So one of the major seed disperser, especially in the Asian countries, is the hornbill. So I think we all know about hornbills. They have a very peculiar horn-like structure on their bills, which makes them very different looking bird. And they are considered as the gardeners of the forest because they do a lot of seed dispersal and they do travel long distances. So they are actually dispersing their seeds through their excreta in various places. And there has been studies that when hornbills, so the seeds which are fallen through the excreta of the hornbill, they actually have a better growth compared to the other, seeds. So they are actually adding a lot of ecosystem service value as such. So seed dispersal comes those as the second service provided by birds, but that's again a very important service if you look at it. Now, what are the threats to the bird pollinator? There have been some studies in which they have looked at all these 1089 species that we just talked about, that which is a subset of the entire world, bird world out there. And it is found that 18 of these 18 1089 birds, they have been uplisted for their threat status in the IUCN Red List during 1998 to 2012. So there has been increased instances in which birds are now getting added more and more into the threatened or the endangered categories, which is very concerning because these are pollinators. And if they are dying out, then there's a lot of problems we are going to face. So when they did the analysis, they found that there are three important threats to the bird pollinators. The first one comes out to be agriculture. The second is the invasive alien species, and then you have the hunting and trapping of the birds. So, and there are furthermore, there is logging, there is climate change and severe weather, and then there is transport and service corridors and geological events. But if you look at the first one, that is agriculture, and then you might start wondering why agriculture might be the threat, because agriculture actually is giving a lot of opportunities for the birds to act as pollinators, right? Because you have crops and they might need to pollinate that, and there are different species of plants that farmers grow. However, it's again a notion that agriculture is always good. Of course, it's there has been a lot of controversy and there's a lot of arguments about it, that agricultural intensification and expansion has actually changed very rapidly the land use or the habitats, prime habitat where some birds might survive or a lot of other animal and diversity may survive. So it has completely changed that, it has completely skewed it. So that is one of the primary sub factor in it. The second sub factor comes out to be the way the agriculture is done. Okay. And as we know that there is a lot of emphasis on using chemical fertilizers as well as pesticides, fungicides, rodenticides in the agricultural zones to avoid the food damage and to increase the food security in a way. However, these chemicals, we still have not figured out what are the implications of having such chemicals used extensively in the fields out in an open condition where they may interact with other other biodiversity as well as ecosystem, and we don't know what exactly going to happen to the entire biodiversity of that region. So that is again a black box, and we are trying to understand why and how it might. But right now, we all know that there are a lot of ill effects of using all these different chemicals, which needs to be avoided. We also have invasive alien species acting as another sort of a major threat, and this actually is a replacement of the native species with which the birds might have adapted or co-evolved over time. So invasive alien species are actually competing out, not just with the plants but also with the birds. And hunting trapping is pretty dominant in many parts of the world, which basically kills a lot of birds all across. However, again, I'll come down to agriculture as because that's one of the major threats to the bird pollinators. So, as we extend our discussion about the bird pollinators and the threats to them, let us also think about other pollinators. And as I mentioned to you, that insect pollinators are actually the dominant or the major strata as we talk about the pollination. So if you look at these cartoons, they may look funny, but you might retrospect and think that is it really happening? So the first cartoon shows that in 2000, if you drive a car through a road or perhaps jungle, you will see so many insects on your car window, whereas now perhaps you don't come across any. Similarly, if you lit a lamp at night, so many insects will gather to that lamp, but now nothing, right? So why this is happening? So there is something called a rapid insect decline that has happened over the last few years, perhaps 10 or 20 years of time. There has been established scientific evidence about it, and this is a very concerning situation because the fundamental layer of pollinators is now disappearing, and these insects are actually they're also a very important layer when it comes to energy flow as well as the biomass as such. So when insects are at stake, of course all the layers above them are going to be at stake. So it's a very concerning thing. Further, if you just pick up honeybees as one of the major insect pollinators, we know that they are also experiencing a lot of different types of pressures. So there's a lot good chunk of crops which are actually pollinated by bees, and they actually are ensuring that there is food security because so much of pollination happening. However, again, they are at loss due to several reasons, including the agricultural practices, including competition, invasive alien species, rapid change in the habitat, and so on and so forth. So honeybees are not just for honey, but they are doing a lot of services as it's just that it's invisible. We don't know about it. So maybe other speakers will take this up. But since we were talking about the threats, I thought let's just extend the discussion further. So if you look at the pollination service as a whole, the threats are pretty common. It though it might differ for birds and honeybees or insects, the underlying principle of threats is still common. Now, what we can do while we know that this is happening, right? So we know that pollinating birds and mammals, they are declining. And this is again because of the unsustainable agricultural expansion, invasive alien species and hunting, which was the primary threats as decoded by scientists, right? So for this, we need to initiate a collaborative and inclusive action in which there may be multi-stakeholder engagement, including the locals, the local government, the larger central governments, and the global leadership coming together to basically create rules and regulations, guidelines for more and more sustainable agriculture frameworks, as well as making sure that pollinators are assessed and monitored and they are actually in check so that we avoid any sort of a ecological crisis that may just erupt just like that, and which is going to hamper our food security as well as the ecosystem balance. So this is the only way forward and there's no other shortcuts to it. Now, as I mentioned that I have done a quick gap analysis in which there are at least four major domains in which the early young researchers who want to study more of pollination, or they want to contribute, they can do it. So bird pollinators are actually comprehensive studies on bird pollinators are still lacking in many parts of the world. So their ecology, their dependence on the pollination, these all things are not well or in-depth studied. So there is a lot of scope in terms of understanding bird pollinators. uh, when a bird is pollinating a particular species of plant, what is the efficiency and effectiveness of that pollination? Again, this is something that needs to be studied really well to understand the dependence and the dynamics of pollination. And as I mentioned, that there are threats such as agriculture, which is changing the land use rapidly. So if that happens, how the bird pollinators are going to react, or what will be the impact on the overall bird mediated pollination in those areas, that again needs to be studied. Now climate change comes out to be again another factor which might be affecting bird pollinators, but we need to understand that climate change happens over a period of time, and it is not something that you can study in a very short range studies or short term studies. So but of course we can model and we can predict about it. So if this data comes in, then there is definitely a lot of information available by which perhaps we can do something better. So apart from that, we have pollution, so in which we have all these pesticides, fertilizers, all the different types of chemicals which are interacting or becoming a part of the ecosystem. So what is the impact of that on the bird pollination as well as the behavior? That needs to be studied. And lastly, but again not the like a final verdict as such, is that with this new information, perhaps every country should adapt to some pollination specific policies and acts to ensure food security and ecosystem health. And it should also contain a assessment as well as continuous monitoring of all the different pollinators in the ecosystems and to understand their roles. So these are some of the points that I have come up with. I think some of you are already working on these, or some of you are interested in it. So you can definitely look into these points and perhaps design your studies or design your research accordingly. So these are some of the references I have gone through. You can perhaps take a snapshot of this. And in case if you have more queries about birds as pollinators, or generally want to collaborate or work together, so here are my details. So thanks a lot for patiently watching and listening to this talk. You can take a snapshot of this. You can check out my lab website, and let's see, perhaps you never know, we might come together and collaborate on a very different question altogether. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pankaj Kopade sir, for enlightening us with the detailed description about the birds and the bees, and how come these small insects and birds, they play a very important role in pollination and in sustaining our ecosystems. So before proceeding with our next speaker, I would like to make sure that everyone is able to see the Q&A option in their screen. So whatever questions you are having, kindly write it down in the chat of Q&A, and we will be sharing the meeting link, the Google Form link for the quiz session shortly after our speakers session. So moving forward, now I would like to invite Dr. Sanej, Mr. Sanej Shuvalji, to take it forward for our next topic.
Thank you, Meenakshi. I will shortly share. Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's start. Hello and namaste, everyone. Myself, Sanej from Nepal, an environment graduate student. And currently I am involved as a research associate with Nature Conservation and Study Center. In this session, I will be briefly describing about the butterflies, their importance, traits, their diversity and status with respect to Nepal, and then some information on the research history that has been done within the Nepal and some conservation activities that we have been doing inside Nepal. So first of all, before jumping with the information on the butterflies, uh, let us know what pollination exactly means. So in very simple terms, it can be defined as the process of transferring the transporting pollen grains from one flowers to the another flower, so that the fertilizations happened and the flowers, fruits can be produced. So in another word, the process of transferring the pollen grains from the male gametes to the female gametes. So and the species which are helping in this process are known as the pollinator species. So generally all kinds of living beings are pollinators in some way, but mostly from the scientific results that has shown that the bees and the butterflies are mostly important pollinator species. So butterflies are known to be one of the important pollinator species. Uh, and the word the butterflies is believed to be originated from the word butter color fly that is only that generally based with the common brimstone butterflies, which is a butter light colored. And there are different views and different myths and different concepts regarding the origination of the butterflies term. And talking about the population, there are estimates of 18,000 to 20,000 of population of butterfly species present in the world to date. Among them, the Queen Alexandrine butterfly is the largest one, and the Western pygmy blue is the smallest one. Uh, the life cycle of butterflies consists of four major stages that begins with the eggs, then caterpillar, pupa, and then the adult butterfly species. And talking about the average lifespan, the average lifespan of the butterflies is of about 20 to 40 days. But in case of some butterflies like the morning clock, they can live up to 6 to 10 months. The butterfly and moths are both included in the Lepidoptera order, which means their body or the wings are composed of the very tiny size of the scales. However, they both are different with each other in very many ways. Like the butterflies are active during the daytime, and the moths are active during the night times. And the butterflies usually have the knobbed antenna, while the moths have the feathery antenna like. While on the resting positions, the butterflies keep their wings closed and uh, closed wings. While in case of the moths, the wings are normally wide open. In case of, and the major difference between the butterflies and the moths can be observed in the pupal stage, where in case of the butterflies, the pupa are covered by the hardened protein cover, which is also known as the chrysalis. But in case of the moth, the pupal stages are wrapped around inside the cocoon. So talking about the importance of the pollinator species like the butterflies, there are various reasons that explains why butterflies are important. Like the butterflies plays an important role in the pollination process. It may not be equal as the bees, but several species like the milkweed species are dependent on the butterfly species monarch for its pollination process. Butterflies are also very important in case of ecological importance, like in ecological food chain, serving as one of the food sources for the insect eating insects and the birds. Thus, and also it also help in the agricultural production, like the butterflies, like the harvested butterfly that feeds on the different species of the aphids that paste on the crops. So they are also helping as the pest control species. Alongside the butterflies is mostly very important in case of the indicator species of changing environment, especially scientists uh, monitor the butterfly species as an indicator species of any kind of changes in the environment, mostly in order to represent the climate change and their effects on the wildlife species. Like the studies in National Academy of Science in Northern America, they have done experiment on the Aedes checkerpot butterfly species, and the result has shown that the butterfly is shifting their distribution further toward the north and the higher elevation level as a result of increase in the temperature. Also, the butterflies are very important in the sense of the economic values, as considering the possibility or the potentiality of wildlife ecotourism, ecotours. And also, so best example is in Mexico, where the butterflies in the roads and monarch roost in the Mexico. So this is the very good example of uh, generating economic resources through the butterfly watching programs. And butterflies have very, very specific food and habitat requirements in different stages of life cycles. They are therefore particularly sensitive with very tiny changes in or in the very tiny modification in the environment, and also serve as an excellent indicator species uh, to know about even a very few or very less sensitive changes in the habitat changes, as I have described in the importance of the butterflies in the previous slide. They are especially sensitive to changes in habitat changes uh, due to the habitat loss and the degradations due to agricultural intensifications. They are being threatened to the butterfly species, like the conversion of the grasslands to the croplands, and the climate change is another threat to the butterflies, uh, which has already impacting some populations of butterflies. The study in the Britain that shows that two-thirds of butterfly species in Britain are mostly in the decline stage due to the climate change. And the climate change has roles in the destroy the butterfly species as well in their habitat as well as the food resources, making it difficult for them to survive and reproduce. Additionally, extreme weather conditions or events can damage the butterflies in their wings colorations, leading to the loss of the pigmentations. One news article from the rainforest partnership has mentioned that the butterflies are losing their pigmentations. So once the bright colored and the wings, bright colorful wings are now has been dull or faded away, which has made the butterflies vulnerable to the predators and the disease. Alongside the climate change, another very important things that threatens the butterflies is the massive use of the pesticides and insecticides for the agricultural productions. So which has a direct effect, detrimental effect on the caterpillar as well as the adult species. Also, one of the study in the Illinois indicate that the butterfly mortality has increased, exponentially increased, especially for the migrant species of butterflies like the monarch, because of the use of rapid use of the insecticides and pesticides for the agricultural productions. Also, another thing is the roadkill, because of which the butterflies are also threatened. And one of the example from the monarch, the roadkills research that was done in the Mexico is that about 50,000 of monarchs butterflies are killed due to the roadkill. So this is also a threat to the butterflies. So after the threats, the butterfly conservation aims to maintain and enhance the landscape for the butterflies, so that the whole environment for wildlife will be improved and enriched in the lives of people now and in the future. The best way to ensure the butterfly conservations or to maintain their survival is by maintaining the sustainable and the suitable healthy habitat. At first we can do, or we can implement or run or conduct the scientific and evidence-based research practices to know about their population, their status, their distributions, their abundance, After then, through conservation activities and awareness camping, along with the field-based training training through the conservation awareness programs, then we after doing by doing such activities, we can close the gap between the knowledge between the conservation biologists and the field practitioners for better conservation practices. We can also promote the backyard and the rooftop gardening, by which we can attract the butterflies and other pollinator species. Uh, we can plant wider, varieties of flowering plants like the marigold species, the lavender species, bush plants, etc. So which are mostly used for the gardening purposes, which attracts the butterflies as well as another other pollinator species. There are also many species, but we can make sure that choosing the right plants which are the attract the butterfly species all seasons. So those chosen plant species has to be flower throughout the year. Alongside, we can also practice having flower pots in our window spaces, roof terrace, balcony, uh, which provide the resting space and refuel act as a refuel center for the butterflies, usually for the migratory butterflies. Having said that, we have to also make sure that whether those plant species are native or invasive or the alien species, or whether they have the detrimental effect with other to the other native plant species, we have to also concern about such things. So butterfly conservation, uh, the butterflies of, but so here are the talking about the butterflies of Nepal. Here are a brief introductions to the butterflies regarding to the Nepals. Like the Nepal lies in the South in Asia, having the physiographic features ranges from the very lower subtropical Tara region to the highest Himalayas, with the 35 broad forest types, 75 vegetation, and 118 ecosystems types that are serving as the different faunal diversity and the floral diversity inside Nepal. So there is a very long butterfly research history in Nepal that started from the 18th century to the present, and the checklist has been updated from the initial accounted for the 44 species to the present date of 692 species of butterflies. Uh, Nepal includes six butterflies that are related with the six family species, like the Papilionidae species, Pieridae family, Nymphalidae, Lichenidae, Hesperidae, and Rhiodinidae. So latest checklist of butterflies, annotated checklist of butterflies of Nepal has checklist consists of 692 butterfly species belonging to 55 tribe and 266 genuses. Among the butterfly species, the nymphalid families consist of more number of species, like 239 species of butterflies, and the Rhiodinidae species, under the Rhiodinidae families, there is a least species of number. So among the butterfly species, most of the butterflies are distributed, or their observations can be recorded in the middle lines, whereas the least in the high lines. The status of butterflies of Nepal has been illustrated by Biodiversity Profile Project 1996, which has enlisted 142 species of butterflies under Nepal Red Data Book under the different threatened categories like the endangered, susceptible, vulnerable, and based on this, 12 species are categorized under the endangered species, 88 species are under susceptible, and 42 species are under vulnerable species. Among these species, three species like Kesari hen, golden birdwing, common birdwing are also enlisted in the CITES list under the Appendix 2. And among these species, the Kesari hen is also protected under the National Park and Wildlife Conservation Act of Nepal in 1973. And the Krishna peacock is late Colin Smith has declared, or the proposed the government to declare the Krishna peacock as the national butterfly species, but it has not been declared yet. Alongside the scientific and the evidence-based research, talking about our organizations, we have been implementing and conducting different conservation activities like the field research, community awareness campaigns, field-based training, event promotion, citizen science in collaboration with different local authorities, including the governmental, non-governmental, and different private sectors. Also in cooperation with the universities and the colleges. Along with this, we have also produced different communication, conservation communication materials like the posters, educational videos, and scientific writings, which you all can find in our website ncsc.org. So recently, this uh, slide is particularly related with our recent activities of Big Butterfly Count Nepal in order to promote the citizen science concept. So in which we have partners with 10 different sectors, and so I in with these all activities, we have also a vision of producing a citizen science based mobile applications in near future, so that we can collect the data from the very field, and then available those data freely through the GBIF services. So we are also planning and visions, the conceptualizing the process of making those that mobile applications alongside with other in for collaboration or the cooperation with multi stakeholders within the country as well as outside of the country, Nepal. So I hope all the participants get some basic informations regarding the butterflies and their traits, their importance, and some information, background informations of Nepal, butterflies, and our activities. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and special thank you to NCSC and the Sustaina Greens for allowing me this opportunity to present my these presentations to the last. Thank you. So if there are any questions, let me know on the letter. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Saneji, for very informative session. And you have shared the case studies with respect to Nepal and the citizen science about the butterfly conservation and the activities you are taking so far to create awareness among the students as well as the private owners about butterfly conservation. So without delaying further, we are running short of time. So now I would like to request Mr. Sanjan Thapaji from Small Mammals Conservation and Research Foundation to take it ahead for the information related to bats. Okay, thank you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Meenakshi and her team and Jeevan for this opportunity to be here to present some information which I have gained since more than 17 years. Okay, so I'm just sharing my presentation here. So my name is Sanjan Thapa, and I'm working with Small Mammals Conservation and Research Foundation. Small Mammals Conservation and Research Foundation is working especially for the small mammals. It covers about 151, more than 151 species in Nepal, and it prioritizes the species that are neglected in conservation arena in our country. Can you see my presentation here?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
We are able to see it. Could
Yeah,
you
thank
please
you. Thank you.
hide the option coming below?
Sure.
Yes.
No, thank you very much. So
And
I'm going to,
sir, a sincere request to kindly finish it up in 15 minutes.
sure.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Okay, so I'm just presenting here the ecosystem services what bats provide in our country, but I'm taking some examples from the abroad as well, and I will also outline the importance of the bat species that provides the ecosystem services as in a global context as well. So currently, I'm working as an executive director in Small Mammals Conservation and Research Foundation, which is based in Kathmandu, Nepal. And I'm also doing I'm about to finish my PhD from School of Life Science, Guangzhou University, China. Uh, So before starting my presentation, please accept my offer to have a sort of tequila. Whoever takes the alcoholic beverages, I hope that everybody is fine now. So I'm taking, you might be quite curious. So what's the relation of the bats with the tequila? In fact, the bats from the genus Leptodicteris that are found in the North America, they are the main pollinators of the century plant, that's agave species. And this species produces some juice, and the juice are collected and distilled. So that gives the fine tequila, which is very, delicacy in this alcoholic beverage, and it is quite popular all around the world, and it's also a bit costly as well. So this is very clear example that's human and the bats are connected in terms of the ecosystem services which has been monitorized. So globally, bats are quite valuable in terms of pollination, since they are the pollinators for 700 angiospermic plants. And there are several other species which do act as pollinators, and they also provide ecosystem services in terms of seed dispersing. Not only the pollination and the dispersal, but also they're quite, impressive pest regulators. So they offer the regulating services and also diminishing the disease vectors. And all of us know that all animal species are ecologically and important as a food chain and food wave. And also the bats provide the best example of the organic fertilizer, and it serves as the best organic soil fertilizers all around the world, especially in Thailand, even in some parts of Nepal and in India, and especially in the Mexico and also other countries as well. And especially for the ecotourism, it has been one of the best example for ecotourism in Texas in US. The Texas Avenue Breeze is one of the best example for the ecotourism of the bats, and they earn more than $100,000 every year from the ecotourism in the Texas. Also, in some national parks in the Africa, they have set the quite good example of ecotourism in especially in the African protected areas. So, in terms of Nepal's context, so Indian flying fox, I hope that all of us know about the Indian flying fox. They are a very good example for the pollinators and seed disperser. And from our preliminary researches, we have found that 8 families of tree angiospermic plants are pollinated, and other species are seed dispersed by the Indian flying fox. So there are a few studies which have resulted, which have gained the knowledge that the 8 families of the trees from the families Myrtaceae, Bignoniaceae, Saptaceae, Anacardiaceae, Rosaceae, Forbiaceae, Leguminaceae, Heliocarpaceae, Apiaceae, Pinaceae, Brassicaceae, Malvaceae, Proteaceae, and Anacardiaceae. These are the several examples of several families of the angiospermic plants that has been pollinated by the Indian flying fox. And these are the examples from Nepal. And we also have some anecdotal information about the Indian flying fox acting as a good pollinator and seed disperser for several common fruit species such as banana, papaya, mango, lychee, and even amla. There are several other. So here you can see, and also Indian Nepalese. Some literature say Indian buttertree, and we also say Nepalese buttertree. That is the Diplocnema butyracea. So it's a good species that pollinates and seed disperse these plants. Apart from the Indian flying fox, we have smaller fruit bats. For example, the greater short-nosed fruit bat, this also serves as a very good pollinator and seed disperser for several species. Though we don't have much research regarding this in Nepal, we have some anecdotal information that it's one of the best pollinator for the, especially for the figs, such as the gular trees, the cluster fig trees, that and there are several other religious trees such as the Sami, Rudraksha, and even there are several other, the people are there. And here you can see a photograph. This is photographed in Nepal, and it's in 2009, that the coffees are also dispersed by the short-nosed fruit bat. However, we don't know that whether the seeds dispersed by these species do well generate or not. But for some example, such as the gular trees, these cluster fig trees, the bats such as the Cynoprus sphinx, that is the greater short-nosed fruit bat, they feed on the seeds and the fruits of these, and they disperse the seeds, and those seeds do germinate from this. When the bats just from their feces or from their ejecta. So so after that, these trees do grow up after the bats feeds on this, the fruit of these gular trees, the Ficus racemosa. And in the hills and in the Tarais of Nepal, we have seen that the greater short-nosed fruit bats do also disperse the seeds of figs and several types of figs, and also this Rudraksha tree, Heliocarpus sphericus. So they take over to their roost, and they chew it and then throw it through this ejecta. And after this seeds are dispersed, and there this Heliocarpus trees grows up, so generates from there. And there are also several, we have also seen that the fruit bats also feeds on the guava plant, and they disperse their seed to some larger distances. So what is the difference between the seed disperser by the birds and several birds and the bats? Bats, they take their feed to a longer distance or to some distance. However, the birds generally feeds the fruits at the same place. In the same plants. So that's the difference. The bats carries their fruit. However, the birds feed on the same branches or in the same tree, on the same tree. So there are some preliminary studies on the Lesnols roset, Rosetus lesnorti species. This is the one, this species pollinate and seed disperse 11 species of the wild as well as the cultivated fruit species. And one of them, the most common, is the Nepal butter tree. That's the Diplochnema butyracea, which is a commonly feed by the Lesnols roset as well as the Dawn's bat. So Dawn bat and the Lesnols roset, they do pollinate the flowers, the species of this the flower. This is from the Diplochnema butyracea, that is the Nepalese butter tree or Indian butter tree. So these species, the dawn bat and the Lesnols roset, they do pollination of the flowers, and they also are the disperser of the seeds of these species. They do visit to pollinate the plant and to disperse their seed. And then what happens during their visit to pollinate the plants as well as to disperse the seeds? The Chepang community is one of the ethnic and one of the sociologically, this species. There are very disadvantaged group. So this group, these are the Chepang people. They uses the net and they capture the bats, such as the Lesnols roset and the dawn bat, and they feed on the species. It has been a long history. They have been doing this practice from a longer time. So in Nepali, the Diplochnema butyracea is called, the Indian butter tree or Nepalese butter tree is called chiuri, and bats are called chamera and Chepang communities. These all are interconnected with each other. These communities they plant the cherry trees, and in which there's bats to visit, and they capture the bats while they come to feed on the seeds or in the fruit, or to pollinate the flowers. And then they capture the bats and they take it as a bush meat, and it's very nutritious and highly nutritious for them, and it also acts as a bush meat. So free source of protein for them. And on the other hand, bats are also very good example of the pest controller. For example, in Nepal, there have been some basic research that have shown that 9 insect orders, such as Coleoptera, Diptera, Hemiptera, Homoptera, Hymenoptera, Lepidoptera, Orthoptera, Trichoptera, Thysanoptera, etc., and several 25 families has been identified from the bats' droppings, bat guanos. So so from the guanos, you can see it's very clear that they hunt the grasshoppers or the hoppers. And so these are the parts of the insects that was found from their bat guanos that was collected from the caves in Nagarjun cave in Kathmandu and Mahendra cave in Pokhara. So these are the parts of the insect uh, wings and the parts of the insect's thorax and others. I mean, the thoracic legs and the other antennas are there, from which it can be interpreted that the bats acts as a very good pest controller. And also they, in some parts of the country, for example, in Manaslu Conservation Area, the bats do control the pests, including the Coleopteras, Lepidopteras, Orthoptera, and several other the orders and the families of the insects. So they are the very good pest controllers. In agriculture, insect pests has been controlled by the bats. So these are basic example which has been found from basic researches in Nepal. Bats also, on the third part, act as a zoonotic disease host control. So it helps to control the host of the zoonotic diseases, such as especially the mosquitoes and the sandflies, especially. And it also controls rodents and bats as well. And they control the agricultural diseases that has been spreaded by the rodents and the insect groups. And also they control the mosquitoes and sandflies, which also acts as a host for several diseases such as malaria, Japanese encephalitis, dengue, Kala azar. So there are several other species. And however, bats also act as a reservoir for several viruses and several bacterial, bacteria and other species, such as the leptospirosis. Are leptospirosis are caused because of the bats, as well as of the urine from the urine of these rodents. And they also act as the reservoir for the Nipah and COVID, the coronavirus, and there are several, even the Ebola virus in Africa, and several more than 200 viruses are found in bats. So now, looking in the agricultural landscape, we can see the bats also act as a very good fertilizer, organic fertilizer. So it helps in increasing the soil fertility. So this is the photograph that a boy carries a full sack of the bat guano that was collected from a cave in Tanaho district of Nepal, and they have been using this in the fields and the agricultural landscape or the farmlands or the terraces, which is very near to the caves. And also and they also use this in their homestays. And also we have done an experiment to see whether these bat guanos are quite efficient organic fertilizer or not, since because bats feeds, especially the carnivores and the insectivores, bats feeds on the rodents and several other species and insects primarily. These guanos are very good source of nitrogen. So that's why they should act as a good fertilizer. So we wanted to see whether those bat guano acted as a good fertilizer or not, or is it efficient or not. So we applied on the tea plantations, and we could after a month or more than that, we found that indeed the bats guano are a very good example of this, uh, organic fertilizer, and they are quite efficient because I already mentioned that they feed on the insects primarily, and these insects are very good. So and they have very good source of nitrogen. So this is a very efficient example, and they are very efficient organic fertilizer. So thank you very much for giving a chance to participate here, and I would like to acknowledge to all the people who has been kindly supporting us and continuously supporting, doing favor to the bat conservation in Nepal and in the South Asia. Thank you very much, Dr. Meenakshi and Jeevan and her team, for inviting me to have a presentation. Thank you very much again, once again.
Thank you so much, Sanjan sir, for briefing us about bats and their ecosystem services. We have a very interesting session and discussion, and there is a question for you, Sanjan sir. Pankaj sir has explained about the feeding types of feeding behavior. So one of the participant has asked, does the same apply to bats too? Like the mutual antagonistic feeding behavior, is it the same applicable for bats too?
So far, we haven't seen any such example that bats act as an antagonistic. It's only in the case of Central America, where there are three species of this species. I mean the blood feeding species. So we just have the example of those three species which are not found in this region. Rather, they are found in the Central America, and they feed on the blood, especially from the mammalian species rather than from the humans. So we can see that the bats have such roles, especially in other parts of the world, especially in the Central America, not in this region. So they have been feeding on the bloods of poultry and the birds, as well as from the mammals, the swine and others. So it's not something like they feed on the human bloods. So there are not so many examples of the bats that are feed on the human bloods. Rather, however, if they are fed on, then they might be feeding on human blood as well. However, there is no such natural example that the bats has been feeding on the human blood.
Thank you for the explanation, and I hope all the participants have listened the presentations from the speakers very carefully, because in our quiz, which we will be sharing the link shortly over the Q&A section, the questions are based on the speaker's session. So I wish all the best, and I request Jivanji to please share the Google form link of the questionnaire in the Q&A section. All the best to all participants. So it will be a 15 minutes quiz. There will be 30 questions. 2 minutes per question time is allotted. So give your best, and we look forward for exciting opportunities from you, that you you do this test very nicely, and all the best to you. Thank you, everyone. So Jivanji, are you there?
Yep.
Okay, so I can see some raised hand from Divya, Dr. Michelle, Sanvi Yadav, Sarita Maurya, and Simran Dani. So we will be taking question answer. So whomsoever is having any doubt, any question, they may please write it down in Q&A section, or in the chat box, or they can just raise their hand so that Jivanji can unmute them.
I think it would be wise first to lower all your hands, because there are raised hands from the beginning. So it would make us very easier. It will make us easier to find you out.
Okay. So Jivanji, over to you. I guess still there are few participants who are answering the questions. So meanwhile, Bhavya will be preparing the list of the participants who have completed the questionnaire. So we can take the Q&A.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy. I'll just go looking for raised hands, and I can see Divya has raised her hand. Do you have any questions, Divya? I'll just unmute you. Now you can ask your question if you have any. Dr. Mitchell Teso, do you have any question?
I have a question. The point is I have attended the webinar, but I just cannot get the link. My
okay.
Q&A is not working, and the chat box is also not working. So please help me.
Okay.
So we may send you the link. We may send you the link. So could you please confirm your email ID here?
Yes, it's botanist0108@gmail.com.
Botanist0108 at
Yes.
gmail.com. Okay. So
Yes.
we will be mailing you the link. Okay.
Okay.
So Bhavya, could you please share the link over the email? We can move to next.
Yes, ma'am. On it.
I think Divya wants to speak. Divya, you are on mute.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, ma'am. I do have the same query. The question and answer segment is not working, and I'm not getting the link for the questionnaire.
So, okay. So could you please spell your email ID?
Okay, ma'am. It's Div Rawat, DIVRAWAT @gmail. Sorry, divrawat0495 @gmail.com.
Okay. So we will look into it and we will share you shortly.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
I think there is another from Vishal Chetri. Anil Rai. Is it the same thing you are facing?
Yes, it is the same.
Okay, okay. So, Bhavya, please look into their email IDs, the registered email IDs from Ajram Tahur, and then Vishal Chetri and Bhagya Narayan ji, Amresh Kumar.
Yes, ma'am. I am facing the same problem.
Okay, okay, okay. So, if anyone accept this, if anyone has any question, please let us know. Jivan ji can take it forward.
I see that there is a query from Simran Dani. It's about, are there specific plants or wildflowers that we can plant to increase pollinators in urban gardens? I guess Sanjandai, Pankasa, or Sanis, anyone can take this, I think.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question indeed. I was just typing the response to it. So we have to actually look at the holistic nature of the ecosystems rather than just focusing on pollinators here. Though the question is about pollinators, I would like to mention that when such questions come in picture, then we should first go for something called ecosystem health assessment, which actually gives us a holistic picture of how the ecosystem is doing, not just, let's say, bird, not just insects, but the entire ecosystem. And then accordingly, we need to figure out what is missing, what needs to be added, or what needs to be deleted or modified, and go for the restoration, ecological restoration of those areas. So the urban areas in across the globe, they are experiencing a very different pressure altogether on the biodiversity, and almost each city has its own different questions regarding biodiversity and the ecosystems. So a very local sort of an approach is very much needed here, but everything should start with the holistic nature of ecosystem. So that is what I feel like.
Thank you, Pankasa. There is also another new query. In the modern era, human has achieved some recognizable achievement in different fields. Can humans develop effective artificial pollination techniques or technologies to supplement natural pollinators? And what are the possibilities and limitations of such approaches in maintaining ecosystem health and agricultural productivity? I guess, again, this goes for all of our three speakers. Anyone can take it, I guess.
Yeah, if anyone is willing to answer, definitely. I mean, others can answer it.
Maybe
If not,
Sanjay?
I'll answer.
Or maybe Pankaj, you can take it. I guess Sanjay is busy.
Yeah, so as it's mentioned already in the question, so there are ways people are doing the artificial pollination, and these are actually mixed grouping of crops, as well as they're actually manually doing the artificial pollination that's happening. However, again, I would feel that the natural way of pollinators is always going to be efficient, not just because they are doing pollination, but they are because they're interacting with the system. So which adds a lot of different types of dimensions altogether, which we are missing out here. So for instance, if you're talking about an insect pollinating a plant, it's not just about the nectar or the insect coming and going from one plant to another. It is a whole set of interactions which the insect is having with the plant, as well as the plant is having with the neighborhood. So these cannot be achieved in an artificial manner. However, when there are severe issues with the pollination, the artificial pollination is what people go for, but that's not the solution. That is just a temporary fix. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. There is a new question. I think it's a very broad general question about how we can conserve pollinators. Again, I would really encourage other speakers if they want to answer this question. Sanjay.
So, like, I would like to answer this. Like, the first thing, what as a common citizen we can do is the plantation of native plants. This is the best thing we can do because the host plants, they provide the habitat and the natural food requirement for all the pollinators and to maintain the diversity. This is the small step which all of us can do besides doing the awareness activity among the school, creating awareness among the children, that how they can take care of the small plants in their balcony or in their garden, and they can see the bees, the butterflies, the small birds who are coming for nectar, and they are helping in the pollination. So this is one of the small thing which we can do on an individual level. Besides the research and development, obviously they are taken a very advanced measures for conservation. Citizen science is one of the thing which has been taken up throughout the world, and Dr. Pankaj sir is seriously involved with citizen science. Even the Saneji and Suvalji are actively involved with citizen science, and there are many specialized commissions in IUCN which are working towards the conservation. I think this is the best thing we can do to promote conservation. And besides this, I think Jivanji, you are the best person to answer this. Other things which common people can do within their permissible limits, or what I can say within their exposure, so they can be a part of this conservation initiative.
I guess it depends, on what kind of resources you have access to, and I think all three of our speakers did brilliantly on, covering how to protect pollinators with either balcony or citizen science, or even the gap analysis. I think it is a very good way forward to try to bridge that gap analysis done by Pankaj sir, and the citizen science aspect covered by our very own Sanes, and then the threads discussed about bats, spice, and then there. So I think you can do all that. And with that, I have to apologize because we are running out of time, and so I'll have to close this session. But first, I would like to thank all of you, every one of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making this international symposium on pollinator conservation like a grand success. Oh, we are really grateful that you are here. Thank you to all of our esteemed speakers. Thank you to Pankaj sir, Sanjan Dai, and Sanjay Prasad Swal. You all three speakers have given us so much insights on the conservation status, on the research status, and the gaps and the threats on bats, bees, butterflies, and birds as pollinators. We are really sorry that Omaima couldn't join us, but we still want to thank her. Our heartfelt gratitude goes to all our STEM collaborators, IUCN CC, Nature for All, and MIT World Peace University. A special thank to the organizing team, Garima, Pratiksha, and Bhavya. Thank you for making this symposium such an well-oiled event. This has been a fantastic experience working with you all. And last but not the least, I would want to thank all the pollinator species across the globe. Thank you for keeping our ecosystem healthy. And since it's a pollinator symposium, I guess we have to thank them all. Regarding the certificates and gifts for the quizzes, I think we have to halt the announcement of the quizzes because some of our participants were having issues. So for those who have not gotten the link to the quizzes, could you please email us and then we can send you the links and then we will announce the winners and how they can collect their gift later on through email. I guess that's the best way forward for us now. And so thank you once again. Thank you, everyone. And is there anything else, Meenakshi?
Nothing, just I want to announce the same thing which you have covered, that those who faced difficulty didn't got the link in the chat box or the Q&A section. Our team will have mailed you the link, and we will announce the results over the email, and we will announce the winners over the email. So thank you for devoting your time on the weekend, and like stay connected and follow Sustaina Greens, NCSC, MIT WPU, Chaturulu Lab, Nature for All, as well as IUCN and Small Mammals Conservation and Research Foundation. Thank you so much, everyone.